Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. Welcome to our webinar, 4 Signs Your Data is Actually Ready for AI, brought to you by our friends at Striim. I'm Brian Mink, co-founder and president of Data Science Connect, the world's largest data and AI ecosystem for enterprise leaders. Today, we're excited to welcome hundreds of attendees from all over the world to explore how organizations can move beyond AI experimentation and build foundations that truly support AI at scale. Many enterprises believe they're ready for AI once models are selected, platforms are deployed, and pilots are underway. But in practice, AI initiatives often stall before reaching production, or they underperform once they do. The root cause? Your data isn't actually ready. In this thought leadership session, we're excited to be joined by Bengtson, VP of AI Solutions at Striim, and Naveen Punjabi, Director of Analytics and GenAI Partnerships at Google Cloud, who will unpack 4 critical signs that your data foundation can actually support AI at scale. Drawing from real-world customer patterns, we'll explore why centralized data isn't enough, how invisible data errors derail AI outcomes, and why stale data threatens use cases like RAG and AI agents. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. To make this a little more in person, we suggest you add a photo to your profile and include your bio, LinkedIn profile, and other information you want your fellow attendees to see. Next, please take advantage of the chat feature in the right sidebar to engage with your fellow attendees in today's content. And finally, to learn more about how Google Cloud and Striim help enterprises move from AI experimentation to enterprise impact, check out the call to action below during the webinar. Now, without further ado, I'm excited to turn things over to our speakers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I'm happy for you to be here. We're here today with Data Science Connect. Thank you for having us for this webinar. The webinar title, 4 Signs Your Data is Actually Ready for AI. This is a topic I think that becomes more and more relevant, so we're excited to talk about it today. I'm Jake Bengtson, VP of AI Solutions at Striim, and I'm joined today by Naveen. Naveen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, Naveen, I lead our data cloud as well as AI ISV partnerships at Google Cloud, and really excited to be here.
Great. Thank you, Naveen. So just we'll go ahead and dive into things. So today we hear more and more about AI. I don't think you can escape it. It's everywhere. It's talked about in the stock market, in the news. Across enterprises, AI investments is absolutely accelerating. That's something we continue to see. And we're getting past this point of, so much of time was spent in doing POCs and understanding what models can do. The models just get better and better and become more and more usable. And so we're getting into this state now of organizations really trying to figure out how to get value out of the AI now. They've been able to have successful POCs, but a lot of initiatives have failed when they've gone from that POC into actual production and building into the workflows that employees will actually use. And a lot of people have talked about why that is. There was a paper that came out last year that made a lot of rounds on LinkedIn. It was from MIT, the NANDA group there, called The State of AI in Business for 2025. They had a lot of bold claims on there as far as the actual return on investment that is happening. And their findings were essentially there was a very small amount of return on investment specifically for task embedded AI. So not just like a chat bot. Those are relatively successful, like in the 30 to 40% return on investment. But for task specific AI that was being embedded into workflows, they were seeing more like a 10% of use cases that were actually returning something from that investment. And they came together with a few reasons for that. It was things like AI lacks persistent memory and learning. So just the idea that you can have the experience of working with AI over a period of time, and then you have to go back and remind it what you've talked about. That's not a great experience for users. Users will tend to stop doing that in that instance. Another, that AI is not embedded into real operational workflows. So if you have built a tool that is separate than the tool that your employees are actually using, that is a horrible experience if you're going back and forth between ChatGPT. I know, like when I was first using ChatGPT or Claude to be able to write code, or like a Vertex or something like that, bouncing back and forth between these different tools and then putting it into my workflow was not amazing. But now with new tools that come out that are built into the IDEs, we're getting more of that experience. So if you have it where it's not embedded into the workflow, that is not something that is going to be acceptable to the employees and adopted the way that you want. Another is just outputs degrade without business context. So you can do, these models that are available today that Google is coming out with, that others are coming out with, they have been trained on massive amount of data, but hopefully they weren't trained on your company data, your enterprise private data. And that really is your secret sauce. And if the model doesn't have context to that, you're not going to have a great experience, because you're going to have to continually add in that, and it's just not going to be working as well. And you won't have a differentiated model at the end of the day, a differentiated workflow. And lastly, organizations deploy AI like software, not like a capability. Just like a traditional, we can cut a release, it comes out, and now there's this new capability. It's more like, in my mind, Naveen, it's almost like bringing in a new employee, where you don't just release a new employee and now they're productive. It's more that you have to teach them over time. There is like a scale up period where you have to accept that it's not going to work as well, but they're going to get better over time, so that after a few months, they're actually achieving a lot of value. And so at the end of the day, like, the results that we've seen because of some of these issues is that the AI looks promising in the demos, but when you break into the real world, it really is lacking in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and that's such a, all of these are good points. And I think one of the critical ones that I've been anchored on is like output degrade without the context of the business. An AI model, if you think about it, is only as smart as the context it has right now. It's trained on data, but that context, business context, changes over time. So the model has to continuously catch up with it. So if the market changes, if as a business your supply chain breaks or the customer behavior shifts, your AI model doesn't know about it, that's a gap. It needs those answers to be able to be accurate. So that one resonates with me quite a bit. And I think we'll talk a lot more at length in terms of how Google Cloud and Striim are partnering together to solve for that.
Yeah, great.
So yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one. I was thinking about the discussion. One of the fundamental shifts that at least we see is that as we are engaging, as we are stepping into the world of AI, how do our systems need to be architected in a different way, right? Historically, the data, while everybody talks about the need for real-time analytics, if you look at enterprises, a lot of the data analysis is more passive, historical. But today, the data's job itself has changed entirely. You're moving from an era of to agentic AI. Like if you think about what Gartner has to say, that more than 50% of the business decisions will be automated and or either augmented with the AI agents by 2027. That's a very bold claim. And imagine half of your business decisions, pricing, inventory, routing, customer service, will all be driven in many ways or augmented with AI agents. So if that has to happen, and we see the world heading in that direction, AI agents will need to make split-second decisions. They will have to impact your revenue. They will have to impact your customer sat scores. And the question is, how well informed are these models on the data that you have available, and are they being able to access current data in a governed fashion? I think that that becomes critical. The AI agents, if you're running on old data, 24 hours old, invariably will lead to bad decisions. So real-time, unified understanding of your data with the right business context becomes critically important. And if you go to the next slide, I think we talk about why the existing frameworks, the approaches don't work very well, right? If you know that AI needs fresh data to survive in production, well, the question is, why is it difficult to do so? And the harsh reality is that existing systems actively inhibit you for AI adoption at scale. Like if you think about legacy systems, they weren't built for the demands for real-time systems. When you look at enterprise landscape and you see, we fundamentally see, and we are talking to customers, four key barriers. The first one, of course, is the data silo. It's more about, if you have to enable real-time insights, you cannot be having data in different systems sitting far away from each other. And you need to have a real-time pipeline connecting all of those things to come together. customers do need systems purpose built for different use cases. So, for example, you need a database for OLTP operations, but that data that is in a database needs to be in sync with what's being built on the data platform and where the front door of AI is, whether it's Gemini Enterprise, where the agents are being deployed. And that's one key aspect. The second one is you want to have a system, the data platform, which is not locking you in. You need to be built on an open standard. Data should be very easily interoperable. It doesn't help if one system is the data is framed in a not so open standard, and if you're moving the data from one system to the other, then the entire approach in terms of how the data needs to be written, the format, the business definitions, all of that changes. So openness becomes very critical. And I would say the other elements that come into play are the costs and making sure that AI capabilities are well baked into the platform. And we at Google Cloud, I think the next slide talks about the entire approach Google Cloud has been taking it. If you look at the entire AI stack of Google, and there's a few animations here, so you can run through that if you will. On the AI side, Google is taking a full stack approach, going from purpose-built AI infrastructure. Of course, we have the research talent that goes into coming up with what the next generation models need to be, how it can be run on our compute infrastructure. But it goes beyond the models, and now it's more about the Vertex platform that we bring to the table, as well as the capabilities on the agentic side. So that's a critical element on the entire full stack approach of Google. And the reason why this is critical is we talked about the point of you need to have a system which provides you the breadth of services, but is all tightly integrated with each other to make sure that happens. And that's the approach we take on the data aspect of it. So your data needs to be in an open format. It needs to support all types of data, unstructured, structured, semi-structured. All of that is very relevant. So that's the approach we take on data. Then you need to build on top of that data and say, is there a universal data fabric that I can provide for you that informs the AI agents that you're going to be deploying within the organization? What does that knowledge engine look like? What is the metadata, the technical metadata, the business metadata? Can it be available in a universal catalog that is easily accessible and interoperable with systems? That's a very critical next step. The third one is it's okay to be open on the data side. That's fantastic in terms of open standards, but you also want to give optionality to customers to use the right query engine to work on that data. In many cases, you might want to use open standards or different query engines, whether it's Presto, BigQuery itself, to be able to work on that data. And that's the optionality we look at. And then what we do is a lot of work has been done by Google on the AI side, but how do you take that in and make sure that AI experience is available right across our stack? So that's a very critical element of how we think about it. A, invest deeply, full stack on the AI infrastructure that is needed. And B, you need foundational data to be ready for AI. And in that, you need to have an open format. You need to have a universally accessible data fabric, openness on the query side, as well as AI baked into everything that we do. So that's, I'll pause there. Jake, I would love to pass it on to you and see how we are collaborating with Striim to make a lot of the work that we are doing on the data cloud side work for customers, because Striim is bridging a critical gap in terms of making all of this data accessible in the right business context to our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for sharing all that, Naveen. You know, from the Striim side of things, we generally see our customers go through kind of this almost like a stages of real-time data maturity. Everyone has this goal. There's lots of stats around. Everyone says like, yeah, our data needs to be real time, but that like saying it doesn't actually mean it happens. And so in order to get there to this like high state of AI maturity, it's a bit of a path that our customers go through. And so we usually see starting out organizations just need to get to the cloud. And a lot of times, not everyone get to the cloud, but to some version of the cloud. There's more modern databases in there that they can leverage. We have so many of our customers that want to get their data into Google Spanner or BigQuery or something like that to be able to unlock their data. So that's really step one, is getting to the cloud. The second is realizing that the cloud warehouse that you built 5 years ago is probably not going to work for your AI today, because when you built it 5 years ago, you had their KPIs essentially were like, we have a report that goes out once a week. So as long as we have our data, we bring it together once a week into our centralized analytical layer, well, that'll be sufficient for what we're trying to build. And you never really want to like crazy overbuild something that's beyond what the requirements are, because it costs more. But now today, people have gone through these pilots of rolling out AI agents. And when they did the pilots, they just used the warehouse to test it out to see, like, can I do this text to SQL? Can I connect it to here and get the business context that's needed to answer these questions? It worked in the POC, but when you actually look at, okay, now that we go out beyond just a POC, which is looking at just a point in time, if I want to do that in the real context of a real operational use case, I need the actual data as it is. And so it's not enough for your data to have brought together once a week. That data needs to be coming together live in real time all the time. So this is about your data and platform modernization, unifying that data in your lakehouse, data lake, warehouse, whatever you want to call it. It's that centralized data layer, and it needs to be built. That's an actual representation of the operational data as it is. It needs to be unified together in real time. And then lastly, after you start to build these like real-time pipelines, you start to think about, what else can I do? Can I start identifying some events of interest in real time, process them, pass that along to event-driven architecture? That's kind of the final state that we see customers starting to look at. It's not just that I want this agent to kick off because someone manually said to do it. It's building event stream processing. So you're building an event-driven architecture where you're triggering automatically agents and AI to act upon that as it happens. It is important to say as well, so much of what we talk about is agentic, but as well, I mean, there's traditional machine learning that needs all this as well. If I want to build a predictive maintenance use case, I need to work with streaming data. I need to do that event stream processing from lots of different data sources to be able to train and deploy that model in real time. So even though so much of what we talk about today is agentic, I think it's important to keep in mind that the traditional ML that is providing a lot of value in a lot of different use cases. So Striim, really in tandem with Google, is the perfect solution here. There's so many data sources that it's one thing to say like, oh, we have a lot of data in this legacy database and we now need to replicate it into Google in real time. It's very hard to actually build that. If you try to go out and use open source tools that are out there, like you're dedicating an entire engineering team to doing that, and that's going to be their core focus. If I'm an organization, I want to free up that engineering talent to be spending their time on working in Google, working in Vertex AI, and these things to really deliver value. So one of the secret sauces, one of the superpowers Striim has is that change data capture, high throughput, guaranteed transactions out of operational databases, and bringing that together unified into solutions like BigQuery, into Google Cloud Storage. Along the way, we can do a lot of things with that data because we have in-memory processing. So if you want to aggregate, enrich, filter, if you want to create vector embeddings along the way because you have a vector index, that can be handled as well. Then as well as once you start doing event stream processing, we can write to Google Pub Sub. We can set up those event-driven architectures. So if you decide that, a customer that makes this change is a sign of a churn that's about to happen, I can set that up so that we identify that, we write to Google Pub Sub, and this kicks off now an entire process that sends out a promotion to that customer, like your traditional churn analysis. And maybe that's not even just a use case where it's a set programmed way of going about it, but instead you're using an agent that can dynamically decide based on the rest of your data. So all these are really unlocked when you can bring your data together, when you can integrate via Striim into a very complex, useful platform that can do a lot like Google. So today, Naveen, one of the things that we talked about, I mean, it was the title of this, what does AI-ready data actually look like? 4 signs. So I wanted to make sure we spent some time and actually got to hit on those 4 signs. We came up with this together. I think this is an exciting topic. It's something that I think every company has some version of AI ready data. Your data needs to be AI ready. And so there's lots of different opinions on this. I think there's some opinions that are more just bland, like your data needs to be accurate. Yeah, we can all agree that data needs to be accurate, but I'd like to dig down more into these four that we've identified, and I think they're interesting things to talk about. So the first one we're going to say is, number one, data needs to represent current system state. I hit on that a little bit, but essentially just that idea that if your data analytical layer, if your data in BigQuery is a snapshot of what happened a week ago, and I'm starting to build operational AI. AI today isn't traditional machine learning where I had to train it over time and I cut a release of a new model. It is agents making business decisions based on the business data. So it needs to represent the current system state. I think that's something that's often overlooked. It's not easy to achieve, but if you can do that, that is really what AI-ready data looks like, right? It's the actual representation of what is happening in your organization today.
Correct. And I think it's sometimes easy to say, but hard to put a finger on it in terms of how critical it is. I'll give you one of the ways we think about it. If you look at many of the models, like right now, if you look at models being trained, you go through pre-training exercise, then you go through post-training exercise, and you get trained on the data, but the data state changes over time. And if you think about it, if you ask a question, and you'll see this with some of the models, is like you go and ask a question, and sometimes you'll say you're asking a question about what's going on right now in the world. And if it's not grounded, which is the key capability of Gemini, is like it is able to ground the results based on Google search, which tends to be quite relevant. So the answers are relevant, but if you don't have that grounding available, even in the public data set, you realize that the model output is completely off and totally hits the mark. So you see these results already in terms of how model performance can be really impacted by real-time data. And I think it's a very, very critical component. We see this on the model side where customers are now saying, okay, I need grounding of my model, even during the training phase with the most accurate data. But the question is, once you have deployed the model, you cannot lose the importance of continuously fine-tuning it over time with the real-time data as and when it's trickling in. And I think that's a methodology. We've all been through the exercise within organizations to build a model out for a specific use case and deploy and see how it goes. Monitoring the performance of that model over time, observing the drift, and how do you solve for that with real-time data that's coming in is very, very critical. And I think it should not be missed because it sometimes feels like an easy thing to just think through and just pass on.
Yeah, and that's how organizations differentiate today, right? Like because of Vertex and because we have access to the myriad of models, for example, that Google has trained, every organization has access to that same model. And it's very powerful. It can do a lot of things. But the way then you differentiate, the way you get ahead in the market is your ability to fine tune it on your data. That's really otherwise you have essentially like, I would say like the average response to everything. That's what's available in the model. So if really you want to be able to provide that differentiation for your organization, if you want to get ahead up in the competition, you need to be bringing in your data in real time so that model can act upon it. And then that's really when you start unlocking those use cases. All right. So for the second one we have, number 2, data is operationally derived, not operationally accessed. And I think this is something that if you haven't worked in IT a long time and you started to, maybe you're just a vibe coder or someone, you say like, I created this awesome solution. It just needs data that's located in this Oracle database somewhere. We're just going to connect to that. Well, I can write a query against it, and this is how it's going to get that context. IT teams are not going to accept that, right? Like agentic systems are non-deterministic. That's what makes them exciting, is that they can think for themselves. They can decide to write multiple queries to get to their answer. But because of that, it's an unknown amount of load that can be brought to these operational systems. And every IT teams that is supporting every database administrator, the warning signs just go off for them, right? The lights are flashing saying, no, you cannot connect directly to my operational database. This data needs to be derived from somewhere else. And that is a nuance that I think someone that hasn't worked a long time in IT wouldn't think about that. Is that something that you see as well, Naveen?
Yeah, and we talk about a platform that is a data cloud that brings together different kinds of separate systems together. We talk about the databases Google provides. We talk about the analytic stores that we are able to provide in the query engine side of it. But it's very critical to understand that each of these systems have their own operational needs, and they are optimized to serve those needs. What it essentially means is that these systems do need to serve different use cases, but they need to be very tightly integrated. So it just becomes very easy for customers to be able to access the data across the system. One of the things we see is like argument is that everybody is building an agent. These agents are able to talk to MCP servers. So you have a database that is opening an MCP server. Why cannot I just access the data through an agent in that real time? And I would give you a sense like that agents, while they're able to access that when you're asking the question, the MCP server capabilities doesn't give you access to the broader set of data set that is available, and doesn't have the business context in many ways to be able to give you that impactful result. So MCP servers work for scenarios in certain cases, but being able to replicate and bring together as the actual data is changing in operational systems, in other systems, in the SaaS applications in real time is very critical. The other thing that we see is like every organization has not just their data platforms. They don't just have their databases and their analytical stores, their data warehouse or a lake house. They also have many different SaaS applications, and there are mechanisms available. Like if you can have again an agent talk to their MCP server and get the data out. But if you're able to access the actual real-time data through the API interfaces, these applications available, the business context and the data set is much richer, which actually makes your model very, very accurate. So I would pause it at that, because I think we see this discussion within the industry of MCP servers versus being able to replicate data actively. And I think each one has a place for that.
Yeah, I think it's important. Like one of the things that you touched on there is just this idea that you may understand the different connections between your data. And though I understand that the data that's coming from Salesforce or a SaaS application like that, and my data that's coming from my on-prem database, this is how they're related. But your model doesn't, they don't understand as well as you. And so you can't just assume that those connections are going to be able to be made. And that's a lot of the work that's done inside of like a lake house or something like that, is you put in additional work on top of it. And that actually leads perfectly into our third point here of what production ready data looks like for AI. And that is that it preserves business meaning as data changes. And that's some of the biggest work, some of the biggest value I've seen data teams in my career provide is bringing together this data from lots of different places, but I'm putting together the semantic layer on top of it. I've understood what this means in the context of business. Originally, I did that when I set up my lake house because I have these business analysts that are working and being able to understand and build out reports from it. That same data that is valuable for business analysts is the exact thing, the context that AI needs to really make use of that data. And so it is so important that you preserve that business meaning throughout that data pipeline. It's not enough to do it at one point in time. As the data transforms and goes through it as like a streaming pipeline, you need to be able to preserve that context and deliver it then to the AI. The organizations that do that have a rich semantic layer on top of their data that really explains it in plain English, like a human would understand, AI will understand it in the same way and then be able to make those connections.
Correct. This is so critical. And you run into this so many times because the business meaning, as you say, changes. Organizations have data teams, they're using so many systems, and as they start organically using those systems, the business definitions are initially in the context of what they want to get done. But when you are bringing all of that data together, what might be revenue within your SAP system versus what might be revenue in terms of within your Salesforce system might be two different things. So I think it's important to bring the data in real time, but the very important thing is to bring it together in the context of business. And sometimes there will be hey, mismatch of business context that is coming in from two systems, and it's important to resolve it and propagate that back to the system. So everybody is on that lens of being on a common framework. The second critical thing that we see within our system is the fact that you have propagated that system into one place, into a lake house, but how do you make sure it's universally accessible to all the tools that run on the lakehouse, as well as to AI capabilities that will be powered on the lakehouse? And there, I think you see the shift where now on top of the lakehouse, you see open catalogs being available, where not just the technical metadata that is coming in from the systems is there, but as users and agents are using data, the additional business context is also being captured in these catalogs. And the beauty of it is, these catalogs, if you look at the entire ecosystem, all of them are connecting to each other and now starting to talk the same language. So I think everybody realizes how critical business context is and how it needs to be universally accessible. So let's work together with all in the ecosystem to bring it together. So very critical things. If agents that are being built don't have access to this data set, I think will be, you might be talking to one agent who might answer for a revenue question in a different way, and the other one might answer it in a different way, and we don't want that.
Yeah. So what would you say? I'm curious from what you've seen from, I know you work with like some of the largest enterprises in the world. Are companies more successful when they're building out that semantic layer and having the like embedded teams that own the data originally? Are they the ones that should be building that and is propagating to that centralized layer? Or is it more successful if you have a centralized team, like a center of excellence that's going out and interviewing and saying, we'll build the semantic layer, afterwards? What have you seen?
So one of the things, this one is a tough one, because the business context lies within the line of businesses, the data teams that understand what they want to get done and what it means for their business. So I think it's a close collaboration between the teams that are actually building out the data infrastructure and the teams that are actually defining the business context. Every organization has gone through this journey before. And I think now it's much more paramount for them to be in sync. What I would like to do say is, first, we need to bring the business context in. This is a close collaboration, as I said, between the data infrastructure teams and the teams, the users, the business users. And the second one is identify where the definition mismatch is and together solve for that common layer. Because I don't think if we are not solving for it together, being able to propagate to everybody within the organization is going to be tougher. So in some ways, you need the hub and the spoke model here to make it happen. And that's what good organizations are able to get done and move fast.
Yeah, my experience has always been there's always this idea, we'll have the lines of business do it. They understand the data. And I've seen enterprises try to say, this is great. We don't need a centralized team. We'll pass that on and they'll make sure to do that. And then you just get like a hodgepodge of things, and there's not like any sort of feedback loop built into it. That's someone looking over it. There's not any type of responsibility for that. And so I would say the best organizations that I've seen do both, right? Kind of like what you're talking about. It's the lines of business, but as well, I do need a centralized team that's really thinking about this, that's holding everyone accountable as they're building that out. And it's a continual process. Like you can't build a semantic layer and then say, now we have a semantic layer, and it's going to be that same way forever. Yeah. Things change. Those lines of business, things are going to change for them. So you have to continue to revisit that. You have to understand the value that you get out of it and how important this is for your AI, and continue to build that into your workflows.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that you see this disconnect over time is like business users, line of businesses want to move fast because they're aiming to solve for a business need that is urgent, and they work with the data teams that might be centralized who have many other priorities, and things become a bit slower as you engage with them. So I think in the context of solving for the ideal scenario here, what is really important is that you have the data infrastructure teams who are building out the foundation layer be very agile. So the systems that you select, the tools that you select need to be able to bring you that agility in place so that you can respond very quickly to the data teams and the business users across your organization quickly. Because I think if it's going to take 15 days, 20 days to come together on a definition on one key topic, it's too slow for business. And that's where I think the disconnect starts becoming, everybody aims for the ideal, but the disconnect becomes real because the data infrastructure teams are not able to adapt as quickly and be as agile as in the need of AI.
Yeah. I would say anyone that thinks, I'll just put it in my prompts, I'll add in that semantic meaning to my prompts. I would advise heavily against that. I think that's a shortcut that you could use to be able to create those relationships and understanding. But as far as from the perspective of years of building enterprise software, that's going to be a failing strategy. And so just make sure, right, that you're taking a very purposeful approach to your semantic meaning and that you're building that in a platform that you can continue to iterate on and provide value. All right. For our last one, number 4 of what production-ready data for AI looks like is something that's been talked about for a long time, event-driven by nature. This is event-driven architectures is nothing new. I mean, how long has Google had Google PubSub to be able to power these kind of things? However, I think more and more what we're seeing is that agents is essentially like a natural extension of microservices. It's kind of how they're working together, right? They all have these different things that they're trying to do. They need answers and questions from other agents, from other services. The design of an event-driven architecture, it was almost purposely, it was was seeing in the future that AI is going to be coming out and we're going to need to be able to have this PubSub capability. And so something that we're seeing more and more with, I would say, like the advanced organizations is that they're building out their capabilities to be event-driven. They're saying that I don't want humans to kick off these workloads. If there's an issue, kind of like the example I gave, if we think that there's going to be churn of a customer, I'm supplying that into a PubSub layer as an event and saying this is going to happen. And then the agent or whoever that is can take from there and then decide to do things. And then they'll report their decisions to another PubSub layer. Is that something that you're seeing as well, Naveen? Is that, like, from your mind, a core aspect of truly AI-ready data?
Yes, and I think if you start with the framework of event-driven by nature, it just becomes, the architectural stack becomes much more simpler over time. But you have to start with that mindset. Many a times when we talk about real-time data synchronization that is happening within systems, if you double click on it with enterprises, like, oh yes, my data is coming real time, but it's coming, like, technically it's coming every 15 minutes, it's 30 minutes, 1 hour. That's not event-driven by nature in some sense, because as it works in the context of, okay, we evolved from commerce that was done through, let's say, desktops, and engagement that was happening on desktops, to mobile, which became more event-driven by nature. And now I think with agents, the number of interactions the customers will be having with your systems will grow tenfold, hundredfold. So the idea of being able to replicate the data after a certain duration and still be in some sense, hey, think about it as real time, is going to get very outdated very quickly. So very important, if everybody is not already thinking about it, to become event-driven first. I think event-driven, just if you start with that, it just simplifies and makes it make the scalability of AI even easier over time. So it's as you said, it's been there. Folks who have done it, but I think the criticality of this component will become more and more as time evolves, because number of agent interactions will evolve very, very quickly with the systems.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you, Naveen, for your time today talking about this. Any other last thoughts you have about what data for AI really looks like, production data? I know we've talked about a lot, so I don't know if you have anything left over that you want to touch on.
No, I think this is an exciting space. We are all learning and watching how customers are evolving in this journey and tackling customers' problem together. So really appreciate this discussion, and the partnership we have with Striim, because we are able to bring all of that real-time data, business context into our data cloud to unlock customer value here. And that's most important. Customers will keep pushing us in terms of what they need to get done in the world of AI. And we appreciate all the close collaboration on that one.
Yeah, Naveen, we're at Striim. We're so thankful for our partnership with Google. We've seen so many amazing use cases across our customers, unlocking value for them. And so we're appreciative of that partnership. If you want to learn more about how Google and Striim work together, feel free to scan this QR code to go to the page to learn more. You can explore all of our joint solutions and the ways that we integrate with the entire suite of GCP. So thank you all for today. Thank you for coming and viewing, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much to Jake and Naveen for an excellent presentation. Really enjoyed the discussion. If you missed any of the webinar and want to rewatch anything, just refresh this page after the webinar concludes, and you can rewatch it at the same URL. We'll also send out a recording to our YouTube channel tomorrow. So thank you all again for joining us, and to Jake and Naveen, and of course a special thank you to our partners at Striim for making this webinar possible. We'll see you again next time. Thanks.